crashed to the ground with the loss of several thousand people were a reminder to us of our own vulnerability. 4 planes, 3 locations, several thousand dead. The immediate impact and response was to shut down the air traffic system, which is a complicated activity in and of itself. But they very quickly began to recognize the devastating impact that this event, which took place in Washington, outside of Washington, in New York City, and in an isolated part of Pennsylvania, the kind of devastating impact it had upon the local, national, and world economies. For me, 9/11 took place in my home base at the University of Notre Dame. We had a meeting scheduled earlier that day, and we expanded it to try to figure out what would be our appropriate response. This, of course, was going on everywhere. On one hand, we wanted to watch television and to keep up with the events as they unfolded. There was so much unknown. There was so much we struggled to comprehend. On the other hand, we had to deal with the reality of our local communities. And so at Notre Dame, we arranged what for me turned out to be the single most moving event in my 18 years as president. We had perhaps 10,000 people for a Mass on the South Quad on our campus. It was quiet. It was a beautiful day which belied the reality of what was going on in our country. And it was an opportunity for us to support one another, to be present in prayer, to recognize, in a sense, that all was in God's hand, and we needed to stand together in mutual support at this time of crisis. There were other things that happened, of course, after the Mass. We were able to reassure one another, to look into the reality of whose families might have been affected, and to try to keep up with the events as they unfolded. 10 days out, I had a chance to come to my hometown, Washington, D.C., and to be staying in a hotel where I could look out over the damaged Pentagon. What was most surprising to me was not the physical impact on that building, as significant as that was, but rather the way it shut down my hometown, the capital of the world, in a sense. What I was familiar in seeing, visiting my hometown, traffic in the streets, a dynamic life, people going to their work, enjoying the nightlife of the city, had simply shut down. And all of us were pondering what was the next step and how vulnerable was the capital city to further attack. On the basis of that experience and trying to think about what my role as a leader would entail, I decided I wanted to pay a visit to New York City. Originally, I was going to go there quietly, but the word got out in the network, and a friend of mine, Sergeant Eddie Colton from the New York City Police Department, came and picked me up at the airport. And through his intervention, I spent basically 2 days on Ground Zero with total access to the property there. On the first day, we concentrated on visiting the morgue, on walking around the ruins of Tower 2, on trying to absorb with all of my senses the significance of this event. Not simply the loss of life, but to let the sounds and the smells and the visual images that were part of that experience touch my soul. I knew that this horrible event couldn't be absorbed in one moment, but I wanted it to be part of the way I thought about what the future might have in store. Of course, many other people visited Ground Zero, and some had equal access to my own. On the second day, I spent time on Tower 1. I was accompanied by several police officers who had, in a sense, miraculously escaped the worst part of the devastation there. And as we went on top of one of the surrounding buildings and looked down, we were able to try to think about how lucky they were.